There's a difference between do it yourself and do it for a living. At the Home Depot, we get that. And we're here to help pros get the job done with the products and brands you trust. Technology to keep your job on track. Job site delivery to save you time. And bulk pricing on over 4,000 items every day to save you money. When you've got a job, we're on the job. The Home Depot. More saving, more doing.
I'll say this for him, he's consistent.
Well, he's been so consistent all year.
Not the taste, consistency.
Consistently, yes.
Consistency! Thanks, losers.
And welcome back to a Father's Day edition of the Fantasy Football Consistency Show. I'm your host, Bob Lung from Big Guy Fantasy Sports. We are proud members of the full-time Fantasy Podcast Network, hashtag FTFPodnet. As always, well, at least as always this week, because he wasn't here last week, because he had to take his family to Universal, which I was jealous because I want to go back. I haven't been there a long time. My man, Ron Rigney. Ron, good to have you back, bud.
Glad to be back. Glad to make my full-time fantasy debut. Been looking forward to that. Glad to be part of the podcast network here and all the good things that they do. So that's pretty cool stuff. Happy Father's Day to you, by the way. Hope you had a good day. Happy Father's Day to all the dads we have out here listening to the podcast. And if you have a dad and you're listening to the podcast, hopefully along with the #1 dad mug and the macaroni necklace that you got him, hopefully you got him a fantasy football consistency guide. And if you did not, there's still plenty of time to get him one.
There is. And you can get those on Amazon, as always. Just search. So last week on one of the pods that I was on as a guest, somebody did this test. They got onto Amazon and started typing in 2019 and got to CONSI, and the consistency guide popped up as the first thing. How about that? I was very impressed with that. They didn't have to put fantasy football. They didn't have to put guide. They put 2019 CONSI and fantasy football consistency guide popped up. How about that?
And I just did that, and I can confirm that 100%.
There you go.
Here. Amazing.
There it is. Isn't that awesome? I'm like, wow, that's pretty good. I go, because I'm thinking you at least have to put the full word consistency. But no, you don't even have to do that. So it should be easy to find, I guess is our point.
You got to add that I, because if you only go to the S, you get the 2019 Consumer Reports Buying Guide, which if you're in the market to buy like a new
which I actually I get that every year because my mother-in-law buys us a subscription to Consumer Reports. It's well worth the money to get that, and you get the guide for free when you do the report. So buy that. There's your PSA for the day. So the guide's out there. Of course, the best way to get all the consistency you can get is to buy the guide on Amazon. Then at the bottom of the pages, there's a code. Come back to Big Guy Fantasy Sports. You can upgrade to the VIP all access status all season long, not preseason, season long, and for only $10. That's the best of both worlds. You get your hard copy printed guide, and you get the VIP access. You'll get all the updates, updated tier draft list, consistency report, which is all new. And if you've seen it, right? The new consistency report is live. You can now create your own consistency reports with your scoring method in your league. If you're in the Scott Fish Bowl, which we're happy that Ron and Colby and everybody is, you can actually put in their new deal. So it's 5 points for 300 yards passing, 5 points for 50 yards rushing or 50 yards receiving. So you can get all kinds of bonus points. Guess what? You can put that in there and figure out how consistent the players are for that. So that'll be very helpful as well. That's actually free. You actually have free access to that right now because I wanted to show off how cool it was. Check out the consistency report on Big Guy Fantasy Sports.
And real quick, like I said a couple weeks ago, the mobile version just as smooth as the PC version as well.
Mm-hmm. Mobile version is awesome. So yeah, that's all out there too as well. But one of the big new announcements that we're making is for something else super cool this year. We already know we have the Kings Classic. That's Saturday, August 17th. Pro Football Hall of Fame. Still got to talk to the Hall to see if we can get people to watch it live. Hopefully they can. But what's super cool is the next day, on Sunday, August 18th, we're going to do the first ever Midwest Fantasy Football Expo at the Cultural Center near downtown Canton. It's only 2 miles from the hall. It's noon to 6 that day. We're going to have 30-plus experts there. Ron will be there. Colby will be there. I'll be there. We're going to be, repping the, consistency guide, talking consistency. But there's going to be a live podcast stage going from noon to 6. In another bigger room, Event Center Hall, we're going to have live stuff going on all day there. Everything from presentations to Q&A sessions, panel discussions with the experts. Maybe I'm thinking about doing a mock draft, Ron, because I'm trying to get one of the football board guys to come. The boards, the stand-up boards with the stickers. Have them show off their product, do a mock draft right there with 12 of us. Quick mock draft. Got to do it, get it done pretty much in a very fast time period. But, and just kind of, show people where we think certain players are going. So we're thinking about doing that as well. But anyway, great scenario, it should be great fun. If you live anywhere near Canton, talking 4-hour drive, whether it's Cincinnati, Dayton, Columbus, or Detroit, Toledo, Pittsburgh, Akron, Kentucky, upper northern West Virginia, Wheeling, that kind of area, all within 4 hours, come to the event. It's only $20 at the door. But if you buy tickets ahead of time at MidwestFFExpo.com, go to the buy tickets. When you put in your information, you put in the coupon code BIGGUY, BIGGUY, all caps. You'll save $5. It's only $15 to get in. When you come in, you're going to get a swag bag full of coupons and information and stuff that's going to be well worth $15, probably worth hundreds of dollars. Because we're going to have, free VIP access to the Big Guy site. I think Full-Time Fantasy, who's our title sponsor, we're very happy for that. They're also part of, the Fantasy World Championship for FWC. They're going to give away coupons for, discounts to get into those contests and be in those championship games. So all kinds of savings, more than pay for the $15. It's going to be a great deal. So that's happening Sunday, August 18th, Canton, Ohio. Noon to 6. MidwestFFExpo.com. A lot going on, Ron, as you can see.
That's a good thing. Yeah, no, what better way to spend a Sunday, especially, too, if we can have people that can come in and see the Kings Classic.
Right, on Saturday.
Even if not, it gives you an excuse to, come into town and tour the Hall of Fame if you've never been there. And then what better way to spend a Sunday afterwards than to talk fantasy football with a bunch of fantasy football nerds in a confined area. We're going to do mock drafts. Everybody's going to be there. It's going to be super cool. And like you said, you're going to be able to enter some of the drafts. You're going to get the Big Guy access. You're going to be getting some discounts on some various things. So who knows, man? Who knows what other swag?
And we're going to have T-shirts. We're going to have T-shirts that you can buy as well.
Who doesn't
we
like
might
T-shirts?
even have a deal where if you register early, we might give you a free T-shirt for registering early. So all kinds of good deals going on. We'll certainly keep updating the website and keep talking about it here. But we're really excited about that as well. And so like you said, coming in on Saturday, you can tour the hall. Even if you can't watch the draft, which we hope we will, you can tour the hall on Saturday. Or if you want, if you have to drive 4 hours, come to the expo right at noon, hang out till about 3. You're home by 7 o'clock. We're going to have food trucks there so you can eat lunch there, so you don't have to miss out and waste time doing that. You can eat right there, bring the food inside. It'll be great. So anyway, that's all good, and that's what's going on. So tonight, though, we have been focusing on positions versus ADP and more or less focusing on those ADPs and how their consistency correlates to where they're at. We're focusing on wide receivers. And Ron, two of the best last year, and it's hard to argue they weren't the best because they were both 100% consistent. DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams, they're both 1-2 this year, ADP-wise, wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2. Their ADP is floating around pick 107, 108. I've seen it float, though. I actually saw a draft where, and I think this is going out to our boy Bobby Cables. He was in an ACI alumni best ball this past week on the Fantasy Football Mornings on Sirius XM, what was cool was Bobby had the guide, loves the guide, and if you don't believe me, go see his video on Twitter, folks. It's fantastic. Now, don't play this around your children. There may be 1 or 100 F-bombs in it, but it's still fantastic. Anyway, but my boy, Bobby Cables, he took his guide. Listen to it. He had, I think, pick 11. I think it was pick 11. And believe it or not, he got DeAndre Hopkins at 11, which, okay, that's not far off. I've seen him fall a little bit. I mean, his pick's 107. But he went at 11 because the first 10 picks were running backs. So Bobby takes Hopkins at 11. 12-1 goes. And believe it or not, you know who's sitting there for him to take in the second round as pick number 2?
I'm gonna guess Davante Adams.
Davante Adams.
Whoo, goodness.
And I literally was driving, and I just wanted to yell, well, F yeah, because I was like, way to go, Bobby. Bobby busted out 100%, guys. He came back and didn't have a bad draft. In fact, no, I take that back. He had an amazing draft. If you go back and find Bobby Cables on Twitter, he posted I forget what site they did it on, but it did one of those where it gave everybody a grade for their draft. Bobby was number 1 with an A+. And Bobby posted it and said, this is why, because I have Bob Lung's consistency guide. This is what happens when you use it. I kicked everybody's butt in the ACI best ball, or ACI alumni best ball. So anyway, so Bobby's out there. Trooper Tom now has a video out there. So the ACI boys are bragging us up, Rod, which is good stuff. So yeah, he got Hopkins and Adams. I literally was just speechless. I couldn't believe Adams actually fell the second round, but it was so running back heavy, it was almost sickening. But anyway, to each his own. So we know that's where they're at. Their ADPs are, I think, very fair. If I have picked 7 or 8 and, a certain number of running backs are gone, there's no question I'm picking Hopkins and Adams there. I mean, same with you, I would assume?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and as I'm looking at the tier draft list we got, as I'm looking at consistency from last year, I think the biggest thing with both of them is Adams had 15 games played. Hopkins played in all 16. It was 100% consistent. And they both were 100% consistent, right, as you mentioned. But you're getting a decent amount of games out of them as well. And I think that's one of the biggest things that you've got to look at, when you're taking that guy in the first and the early second round is how many games are they playing every year? Are you taking a gamble with a guy that might get hurt a little bit? Or are you taking, a kind of the sure thing when you're getting 16 games or 15 games out of each one of those guys? So to me, It's kind of a no-brainer, not just from the consistency standpoint, but also how many games you're getting out of them as well.
Right, but I think in Adams' case, he wasn't hurt. Didn't he just sit out because Green Bay was out of the playoffs and nobody played in Week 17?
Yeah, it seems like something like that, yeah.
I want to say he was fine, but Rodgers and all of them sat because they were out of the playoffs. And I think they all sat in Week 17, which is why Adams didn't have it. So, so as we move down the list, I'm going to move down ADP wise, and we're using Fantasy Football Calculator for that, as we always do. This one's the one I'm struggling with, and it was interesting. I just did a podcast with the guys from Full Press Fantasy. Michael Thomas is now the number 3 wide receiver, ADP wise, going at pick 111, so he's first round. So he's going ahead of Julio, ahead of Juju, Beckham, et cetera. I'm just not there, and it was interesting because this guy was all in. He goes, "I'm all in on Michael Thomas. I love him." And he goes, and then I looked at your guide, Bob, and I saw that his consistency, he ranked him 15th for wide receivers, and I said, "Yeah." I go, and I love Michael Thomas, and Michael Thomas does have some very good games. He was, 6th in total points. His X consistency actually puts him 10th, so it's a little better than his regular consistency ranking, but I just can't pick him ahead of those guys. Now, I'll pick Michael Thomas ahead of Antonio Brown and Evans and those kind of guys, but I can't put him in front of Julio, Juju, Beckham at this point. Where are your thoughts on Michael Thomas? Do you think he will pick it up a little bit, or do you think that they'll just kind of stay with where they were at last year? There wasn't much significant change in the offense. Ingram leaves, but Latavius Murray comes in. That's apples for apples. Do you see much change? I mean, and then they added Jared Cook, which to me would steal some of the touches or targets. What are your thoughts on Michael Thomas? Where are you looking at picking him if you're going to get him in a draft?
Well, I think we have him ranked pretty fairly. I mean, we have him here, like you said, right in front of Brown, right in front of Green, Thielen. I think that's fine. And it's not like we were down on him going into last season. We liked him a lot.
Oh, we did.
Season.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? We had him going in, I think, second or third.
Right.
If I remember right. So we talked a little bit when we did the quarterback preview about Drew Brees and about his inconsistency last year. And see, wide receiver is a little bit different than running back because obviously the quarterback's just kind of turning around handing the ball off. It's a little bit different when he's throwing in the ball. So I don't know what we're going to see out of Drew Brees. I think I kind of mentioned on the quarterback preview, I think Drew Brees is going to be a little bit more of a better real life quarterback than he is a fantasy quarterback. Not to say that I think he's completely done, but he's definitely not a top guy like he used to be. And that definitely affects Michael Thomas quite a bit. You mentioned Jared Cook coming into town, and they've been known to spread the ball around a little bit as well. So I think when it comes down to it, I think consistency-wise, total points-wise, I think it's going to be just about what we saw last year, maybe a little bit less. I don't know necessarily if I would take him up towards the top around the Adams, Julio, Beckham range, though.
Right, I agree. So we talked about Julio, Schuster, and Beckham, so that's our next picks in order. ADP-wise, Julio going right after Michael Thomas at 112. I think the 112 is very fair. But you know, I have no argument. I really can't say much more than just, yeah. You know, second total points last year, third in consistency, fourth in X-consistency. I mean, I think that's a perfect spot for him. I mean, it's this question, you know, really the only reason he was below that was I think Antonio Brown was higher, but we know Antonio Brown's going to lose a little bit going to Oakland. So I think Julio's in a perfect spot there. Any disagreements?
No, I think right there in that spot, you know, when you look at the ADP, you've got 4, 5, and 6, Julio, Juju, and Odell. I think it just comes down to kind of who you prefer more because they all have pretty solid situations. I mean, maybe you might put Odell at maybe a third spot just because you know Matt Ryan and Ben Roethlisberger are proven, they're battle tested. We know that they're going to be solid. And I really like Baker Mayfield going into this year, but he's kind of the unproven commodity there at quarterback. But I think it just kind of, for those three, it comes down to just who you personally like more and maybe who falls to you where you want to pick a wide receiver as well.
Gotcha. And I think the perfect turn at this point, it depends if you like to go running back, wide receiver. I like to go best. And I see Julio, Odell, 12-1 is like the perfect combination. If I remember, and I know I've done a few best balls where I've been in that spot, and it certainly worked out, you know, very well. So, all right, let's keep moving down the list. We'll move a little farther down. We know what we get with Antonio Brown, but you know, obviously, going to Oakland is going to be interesting. That's for sure. Mike Evans is at 208. I think that's fair. I think we have him a little lower than that. We have Thielen in front of him, and I'm okay with that. I think even Keenan Allen could be in front of him. I think we have him pretty close. I have Evans at 12, Keenan Allen at 13, so they're very close. I'm sorry, 11 and 12. Any thoughts from you on regarding those players, where they're falling? Basically, Evans, Thielen, Hilton, Keenan Allen are kind of in a group that I think you could put them in whatever order you wanted, and I think it would be. I don't think I would argue if you made that order in one of those four ways.
No, I agree, and it's kind of like what I said before with Julio, Beckham, that range as well. I think it just comes down to who you like more. I will say, I think when you look at it from the standpoint of where the production is going to come from, I think when you look at maybe Thielen and Allen, they're kind of those PPR machines that are going to get all those catches. And, you know, we know Keenan Allen's relationship with Phillip Rivers. Jameis Winston and Mike Evans, I think they have a good relationship as well. But I think for what he kind of lacks maybe for that PPR standpoint, he's going to make up for it with big plays. He's going to make up for it with a few touchdowns. So I think it's just kind of when you take where the production is going to come from, I think when you put it all together, I think they're all going to kind of come together in that regard. And I think T.Y. Hilton can kind of be grouped in with Mike Evans as well. You know, he's got that propensity to stretch the field, you know, with the big bombs from Andrew Luck. So I think him and Evans are kind of, if you're looking for those, you know, those 100-yard games, those big plays, if you have those bonuses maybe in your leagues, you might look at Evans and Hilton from that standpoint. If it's just PPR, Thielen and Allen might be the way to go.
Right. So now this is the section, I think 12 through 24 is probably where we have some of the biggest disparities between consistency and ADP. And we start at number 12, and that's Amari Cooper. Amari Cooper consistency last year was 47%. Now people will, as soon as I say that, will say to me, but Bob, what about after he went to Dallas? Yeah, it was 56%. It was like 5 of 8. It wasn't that great. It made it look like it because he started off on fire. But when push came to shove, that team is Ezekiel Elliott, and then on third down, they'll throw it to Ezekiel Elliott. I just can't buy Cooper that high, especially when guys like after him are A.J. Green, Stephon Diggs, Julian Edelman, Robert Woods. I mean, I just can't do it. But obviously people are, because this is an ADP from, data. This is not somebody who made up this list. First off, will you draft Amari Cooper if he's 5th round, let alone 3rd round? I don't know if I even still would.
Yeah, it's gonna be tough. I mean, and you mentioned the consistency and how he kind of brainwashed people because the big games that he had in Dallas were so big compared to what he had done early on in the season for Oakland. I remember us talking about him last year in Oakland and how he just disappeared for weeks at a time, and then all of a sudden he gets traded and it's like he's a new man. But as you mentioned as well, wasn't as consistent as everybody thinks. And when we look in that range where he's sitting there around Landry and Cooks and Lockett and those guys, I'm not opposed to drafting him as my wide receiver too, but I don't know if it's going to be where he's going at current ADP right now. Let's see, he's at 3-4 right here, the 12th wideout. He's not going to be on my team if I got to spend a 3rd round pick. No way. 5th round maybe.
Right.
Depending on
that's why I said, would you pick him in the 5th round? I think I might think about it because at that point he might be my wide receiver 3. Now I'm like, okay, there's some potential.
Yeah. Well, and I think, too, a lot of this, like we said with those 2 groups we talked about before and Cooper as well, I know this sounds like kind of a vanilla generic statement, but a lot of it depends upon how your draft goes. Like you mentioned before, Bobby Cable's getting Hopkins and Adams back-to-back in his draft. I mean, I don't know how many drafts are going to shake out like that, not too many, but you never know what guys are thinking ahead of you if it's so running back heavy. So I think a lot of this, too, just depends upon when you get there on draft day, how everything just kind of falls to you, and then when you look at your tier draft list and who you like on there, and you compare it to what's going on in the draft room.
Right. I mean, the position that is so interesting in any of these best balls that I've done has been quarterbacks, because 2 months ago, Patrick Mahomes is going sometimes in the 1st round, definitely in the 2nd round, no later than 3rd. Now I was in a draft where I got him in the 5th. And I'm like, well, shit, I might as well. Well, that looked brilliant until nobody drafted another quarterback until round 7. And then Luck and Rodgers and Mayfield and all. And I'm like, damn. It's just, I thought for sure once I took Mahomes, the stretch would hit. And then it would all start flying. And I think I was set to turn.
ADP-wise, he's still sitting at 3.5.
Right. So as I said, when he was sitting there, I was on the turn, so I got him at 5-1. And I thought, wow, because I thought if I don't get him, by the time it would get back to 6-7 turn, most of the studs are going to be gone. So I might as well grab him. And it's the 5th round. He's normally going in the 3rd, so I thought I was getting a deal. And then nobody picks even a freaking another quarterback until round 7. I think it was middle round 7. I think then Luck, Rodgers, Watson, those kind of guys all went. I'm like, God, maybe I should have just waited. So, like you said, it's just hard to tell who you're drafting against, what the flow is going to be. And so if you like a guy, you got to go for him. But a guy like Cooper, I just don't see it happening. So let's keep moving down the list. Some of the guys we do like and we think are great picks in round 3 and 4. A.J. Green, Stephon Diggs, Julian Edelman, especially Edelman. I always make the eyes get bigger when people look at my draft list and see Edelman at number 6 overall. And then I tell them, go look at the consistency, 92%. I go, and he only played 12 games, so, and And look at the playoffs. Look at the Super Bowl. This guy is locked in with Tom Brady. He's going to be locked in again this year. He's going to easily be top 10 in consistency. To get him in the 4th round as my wide receiver 2, maybe even 3, if I go like Zeke and then and then come back with a turn and get maybe a Hilton and Keenan Allen and then get Edelman at 4, I'm good. I'm really happy with that. So, yeah, I'm. What do you think? I mean, any disagreements at any of those 3 as solid picks there?
Yeah, I'm good with those. And you just mentioned Edelman. I mean, Edelman, the report. We have the report he has with Tom Brady. They've had a year in, year out. They're not showing any signs of slowing down yet again. As much as we think it's coming, it hasn't yet. You said he only played in 12 games last year, so he did miss 4 games last year, so he could be a little bit fresher. The only thing I kind of worry about with Julian Edelman, just because of him being that shifty kind of slot guy, that PPR guy, is I just kind of maybe there might be a little injury if he gets kind of nicked up, there a little bit, because he is, as much as he plays in the slot, as much as he's over the middle, all the things that he does, taking a little bit of a beating. Mm-hmm. But I'm okay with him there. And like you said, especially if you're drafted in a PPR format, I mean, he's right there, like we talked about. He's getting his points off receptions, and Tom Brady's always looking for him, knows where he is. We know that Gronk is not there as of right now. He could be back. You never know, but he's kind of slowed down a little bit. So Edelman steps in yet again as that number 1 guy there, as he always has been throughout the year. So I'm fine with him there.
Right. Then we go into the LA Rams section of the draft. We're at number 16. Well, not number 16, 404. So wide receiver 16 is Brandon Cooks. Wide receiver 17 is Robert Woods. And wide receiver 20 is Cooper Kupp. Now, obviously, we don't have as much love for Brandon Cooks. And we have Cooks actually at the bottom of those 3. We have Woods ranked at 14. We have Kupp at 16. And we have Cooks at 20. 20, 19. But we have them just as close, grouped together. I still think Woods is the better choice. His consistency was 88%, which was much, much higher than Kupp and Cooks last year. I think Cooks will kind of maintain. I can see them all being very close to in this ranking. I don't see that too far off. And like I said, if you look at the rankings last year overall, that's pretty much how they fell out. They were all fairly close. It's just the Kupp got injured and missed most of the season, but he's back and healthy and running in OTAs. What are your thoughts on the Rams trio, where they're ranked? What do you see? How do you look at the rankings, and where would you put these folks?
I think yet again it comes down to league format. It comes down to just who you perform more. I kind of look at that as the same quandary we have with Stephon Diggs and Adam Thielen, right, as to who's going to produce more. I don't really think we know, but I do think that no matter who you pick out of that trio, I think you're going to be happy with whoever you get. And it's kind of splitting hairs at this point. I mean, I don't think there's going to be much separation, but one of the things I always think about when we talk about these Rams wide receivers is when we talked about quarterback and we talked about how inconsistent Jared Goff was and how far down he was on the consistency ranks. Yet you have all 3 of these receivers being so consistent, which is amazing to me. Right. So that kind of shows you right there his propensity for spreading the ball around, and everybody's going to be involved. And, we don't know. I mean, I don't think I'm ready to, panic 100% yet with Todd Gurley, but, there's a lot of mystery surrounding Todd Gurley and the knee and all that. So that, who knows if that might help, or if he misses games, might force him to throw a little bit more. But I think no matter who you pick out of those 3, you're going to be happy with who you get. Gotcha.
And it was interesting. In podcast I actually just did earlier this evening with, like I said, full press fantasy. That was a question, and I'd never gotten that question before. They said is there a correlation of the consistency of the quarterback and the consistency of the wide receivers? And I gave them the Rams example, and I said, and the answer is no. It's not always that simple. Now, Matt Ryan, Julio Jones, some do, but I said Goff was a perfect example of having 3 guys in the top 24, basically, and yet he wasn't even in the top 12 as a quarterback consistency-wise. So it doesn't always correlate. As we move down the list, now we get into some guys that really haven't proven the consistency yet, but their potential for opportunity, their potential for growth, their ceiling could put them higher. But I'm a little leery. I'm a little reluctant to draft guys, especially in the 5th round, like Calvin Ridley, Chris Godwin, Sammy Watkins, even Kenny Galladay in the 4th round. I'm a little hesitant because he just didn't, he was 24th in consistency, wasn't bad, 21st in total points. So realistically, he's in an acceptable spot at 19. I just don't know if that's good enough, I don't know why I'm sitting here kind of arguing myself, because I really have him. I think I have him ranked 21st. So everything looks about right, but I just can't pull the trigger on that kid when I'm looking at guys like Cooper Kupp or Tyler Lockett, even Jarvis Landry instead of Galladay. I'm not sure why I have Galladay blinders on, but what are your thoughts on Kenny Galladay?
Well, it could be a combination of a couple things, and it could be kind of like what we talked about with Michael Thomas and Drew Brees. I mean, right. Matthew Stafford 2 years ago was one of our more consistent guys. I think he got the award for I think he got the Clutch Moore Award, if I remember right, for being so high up, and he disappeared last year. So that could affect him a little bit. I might be a little leery as well with him to kind of stepping up and maybe being that number one guy with Golden Tate out of there. Marvin Jones is still there, but he could be, kind of forced into that role. When you go down a little bit, Chris Godwin's a guy that I've liked for a couple of years, but I think the hype train has him pushed way, way up. I don't know if he's a guy, like you said, but I'm definitely not taking Chris Godwin ahead of Jarvis Landry. Mike Williams is sitting there at 5'12". He's a guy that I'm really interested in this year. I think he can take a big step as far as what he can do in the Chargers offense. But Chris Godwin's a guy that I'm a little bit leery on, and Calvin Ridley as well. I mean, not that I don't like Calvin Ridley, but I think 5'1" is a little bit too rich for me as well.
Right. We were talking about that as well, and I just said, Ridley could take a step up. I said, but that step up could be 55%, maybe 60%, and I'm just not sure that's enough to get him over that edge. But I said, Mohamed Sanu was top 36 last year in both total points and consistency, and yet you won't even find him on an ADP sheet. I mean, I'm not talking about like a few rounds later. I'm talking about not on the chart, like past round 15. So, I'd much rather, especially if I'm in a best ball, getting Sanu in like round 16 than getting Ridley in 21.
Yeah, you're not kidding, because I scrolled down.
It's not there. I know.
He's not there. But you have guys like you have rookies that are like mid-round picks. You have like Andy Isabella for Arizona.
Tre'Quan Smith.
13th round. Yeah, insane.
Yeah. So, again, do I expect Sanu to drop a little bit and Ridley to come up a little bit? Yeah. But that gap? Nope. Sorry. Not even close. As we move down the list, Tyler Boyd coming back from his injury, I think he'll pick right back up where he left off. Then another one that's kind of one that has me scratching my head, and I'm not saying this is not a good player. I'm just saying there's another player on the same team that's getting drafted. Let me see, round 11, and DJ Moore is getting drafted in round 6, and that's DJ Moore versus Curtis Samuel. Both of them last year were very similar. In fact, Samuel was actually better in both total points and consistency. And yet DJ Moore is going round 6, Samuel is going round 11. I have seen a couple articles actually recently, some people have put out that have kind of noticed that, those numbers, and said, hey, maybe Samuel shouldn't be forgotten. I definitely am not forgetting him, and I definitely been drafting him in a ton of best ball drafts as like my wide receiver 5, 6, much later, and knowing that, hey, they actually liked him pretty much last year, and I think it's still a really good value. What are your thoughts on DJ Moore versus Samuel, and would you draft either one of them?
I mean, I'm not opposed to taking Moore depending upon what else is available there, but if I can maybe skip on Moore and maybe drop down a couple spots and maybe get, I'm even though he's injured all the time, I'm still in on Will Fuller. Will Fuller's a guy that I like. I just wish he would stay healthy.
Yeah, right.
You've got a couple guys kind of in the in-between there that are okay. But, I mean, you also, you could get a tight end in this range. You could get, if you wait on quarterback, you could maybe go there. But I think when you compare their numbers, like you said, they're very similar. And having that big of a round gap in between them is it's kind of crazy to pay up for the premium in round 6 when you can get something similar 5 rounds later.
Right, exactly. All right, as we move down the list, some other guys that, again, we're in that wide receiver 3 range, and man, there's a lot of ones that you could argue yes or no. You talked about Will Fuller injuries. Allen Robinson in Chicago certainly did not have a very good year with Trubisky last year. 38% consistency, missed 3 games. Then you start getting into rookies like N'Keal Harry in New England. I mean, that's just a hype train on fire. Dante Pettis in San Francisco, Christian Kirk, Geronimo Allison, which is actually surprising because I've actually had people who are arguing with me that Allison shouldn't even be the number 2 receiver on the Green Bay team, and that somebody mentioned about MVS, Marquise Valdez-Scantling, being ahead of him. I just find that hard to believe. I mean, he was 4 for 5 in clutch games before he got hurt. He definitely had a very nice rapport with Rodgers. I just don't see him losing the job at this point. I mean, and I know stranger things have happened. We have a new coach, OC, et cetera, in Green Bay. But what are your thoughts on that group? And especially, what are your thoughts on whether Allison will be that man or that guy, or whether we should just move him out of the top 36?
I mean, I think he's the number 2 there right now, but I wouldn't be shocked if Scantling does take that job. I mean, I think they're very similar in what they do, so it wouldn't shock me if that happened. But one of the things I'm noticing when you get to this point, man, it really drops after about when let's say Mike Williams, Tyler Boyd, DJ Moore, man, it really drops off into some dart throwing here, and you really got to hit on some of these guys, so you really got to do your homework. I'm kind of looking in this range as well. Marvin Jones is the guy that kind of sticks out here in like 9-10. When you get to this point, we mentioned him.
Fitzgerald's at 907.
Yeah, Larry Fitzgerald's a guy that, in a PPR especially. But there's a couple guys in here that I'm staying far away from. Golden Tate being one of those guys that I'm not going to look at. DK Metcalf, I mean, when you look through the history of wide receivers as rookies, we talk about the consistency level with rookies all the time and how low it is. It's especially low with wide receivers. Not saying he couldn't get some run there, but I don't know if he's the guy you're going to take in round 9. As I scroll down a little bit, you see some Jacksonville wide receivers sprinkled in here a little bit. I think it's going to be kind of a mix and match with what they do on offense. I don't know if they're going to have a clear-cut number 1 guy. What I am intrigued by, though, are the guys in Denver. And, we got Emmanuel Sanders there, Cortland Sutton. You got Deshaun Hamilton and down a little bit further. So that's an intriguing group right there as well. And that's another case of, maybe Hamilton down there in round 12 let me see, I lost him there. Yeah, round 12, pick 2. He could be a guy that could kind of be that same DJ Moore, Curtis Samuel type scenario where you get him a lot later and you could get just as good a production as you're going to get maybe from Cortland Sutton, who's going in round 9.
Right. Well, and Sanders is going in 10, and I've know there's videos out there of him running and cutting already from his Achilles injury, which is amazing. Because I had an Achilles injury, and I couldn't even lift myself up on that foot for 9 months, let alone running and cutting on it. So he's making a miraculous recovery if those are valid videos, which we assume they are. Like I said, I just think there's some good values in that 9, 10, 11 range. Curtis Samuel's there. Deshaun Jackson, I think, is going to have a nice year. I'd mentioned before about Deshaun Jackson. Last year, his consistency ranked him as a top 36 wide receiver in Tampa, where he was, fighting for touches with Godwin and Evans and, O.J. Howard and all those guys. Now he goes to a little bit clearer picture in Philadelphia, and yet he's going, 5 rounds after Alshon Jeffries? Yeah, 5 rounds after Alshon Jeffries, and Deshaun Jackson had a better consistency number last year than Jeffrey did. So I really like Deshaun Jackson. Again, best ball drafts, eating him up as my wide receiver 5. Just eating him up. Him and Samuels, man, are just all over my teams. I just think, he's already working with Wentz in this offseason. They've had a nice, I've heard a lot of good things about the way they've been matching up well, in OTAs. I just think that's going to be a good pick there.
Agreed, and it's another case of too, where your points are coming from your league best ball. He's one of those guys by far that you're looking at, and when you think about a wide receiver 5 as well. I mean, these are guys that you could depending on the league format, you're going to have a stockpile of running backs most likely as well. These are guys, when you kind of get to this point, as your fifth wide receiver, you're not afraid to maybe drop them for somebody that kind of shows out a little bit in training camp or in the first few weeks of the season as well. And so this is where you're trying to really get a guy that can kind of give you, you're getting that consistency most likely from your first, second, third guys. These are the guys that are really going to make that difference on your team.
Right. So as you look down the rest of the list, is there anybody that jumps out at you that, whether you're doing a best ball draft or even a redraft with a decent bench, somebody you might take a flyer on late and that's sitting there?
As I'm looking down, obviously Devin Funchess, that's, my Colts fandom coming out, but also him as a wide receiver too, with Andrew Luck throwing to him. I mean, when you compare pure quarterback skills of Andrew Luck and our guy in Carolina, Cam Newton, it's not even close. So he's a guy in round 13 that I would be all over, especially in a PPR format. I think he's going to have a solid season in Indy. And another guy, too, that I was really burned on last year that I felt like I took a little bit early, but I wanted to get him was Marquise Goodwin, and a lot of it was injury, was inconsistent quarterback play. But at round 14, I think I had to take him last year in round 6 in one of the Kings Classic drafts. Just to make sure I got him. I liked him that much, and I still do like him, but at round 14, I think that's going to be a steal. And Robert Foster down there as well. I think he's kind of just the guy in Buffalo by default. And so, when you get to this point, it's kind of like when you're looking for free agents at this point in the year in fantasy baseball. You're looking for guys that are going to get you consistent at-bats if you're looking for offensive players.
Right.
Robert Foster's a guy that's kind of just by default the wide receiver 1 right now, and he's going to get touches. He's going to get looks just because he is. And so when you get to round 14, he could be a bye week guy. He might be your wide receiver 6 or 7 at that point, but he's going to get looks no matter what in that offense.
Right. So a couple guys that I like are two kind of grizzled veterans playing in a position where nobody's giving them a lot of love because, again, they're the older grizzled veteran. One of them is Dante Moncrief in Pittsburgh. I mean, you got to remember, just a couple of years ago, Moncrief was having a really good season consistency-wise with Andrew Luck. The problem was he couldn't stay healthy. So all that bad health just pretty much lost him the job. But, there's really not a set number 2. We all assume James Washington. But I've heard a lot of good things coming out of camp with Moncrief, kind of working well with Ben. He's definitely got the potential of both deep threat and underneath, as a receiver. He's obviously played long enough. He's got route running down. I wouldn't be surprised. And again, you're not taking any chance. You're not losing anything if you take him in the 14th, 15th round. But I think he might be one of those guys, especially in a best ball, that maybe James Washington doesn't work out, and maybe doesn't pick up the offense as well, even though I know he played last year. But he was really the number 3. So now he kind of forced into the number 2. If he doesn't hold up his end, Moncrief could sneak in there and be that guy. The other guy that's not even on this list is Philip Dorsett in New England. And a lot of people forget about that. He was used quite a bit last year, especially late in the season when the other guys weren't working out in New England. So I really like him as a potential, he'll stretch the field. While people are trying to focus too much on Julian Edelman, they don't really have a tight end. They had Michael Roberts for like 3 hours. So now they're still stuck with Ben Watson, who's suspended for 4 games. So you got to believe there's maybe another trade. I still think Kyle Rudolph is going to get traded there. I know they signed him to an extension, but it's going to happen. But I just think that, again, somebody like, who's that? Just went brain dead.
Phil Dorsett.
Thank you. Dorsett will do well there. I think he's got the potential to, he's not going to set the world on fire, but he might get 4 catches for 50 yards, 60 yards, and get close to a clutch game and might be helpful for those kind of scenarios. So, all right, well, we got a little over a minute left, so Ron, thanks again for being a part of this tonight, and I want you tell everybody how the baseball, even though you are in second place in the Couch Tomato League now, you're welcome. Tell them how you're.
I'm actually down to third now.
Are you third now? Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
I had a rough couple weeks. It looks like I'm going to get a big one this week, so I might move back into that second place.
All right, maybe you will. Yeah, my team's been kind of average this week. I haven't checked it tonight. So, all right, tell them where they can find you, bud.
At the Real Ma Day on Twitter. Find me on the Nasty Cast on Fantasy or Fantrax HQ and on Fantrax Dynasty Baseball podcast as well.
All right. You can find me, of course, at Bob_Long on Twitter. Don't forget to get the guide on Amazon 2019, CONSI. That's all you got to put in. You'll find it. And, of course, the Midwest Expo coming, MidwestFFExpo.com. Everybody, thanks for being here. Happy Father's Day to y'all. We will see you next week. Take care. God bless.
Don't let this summer pass you up. Power it up. In the 5-Hour Energy Power Up Your Summer Sweepstakes, you could win one of 5 amazing experiences. Buy any 5-Hour Energy product, including Cherry Extra Strength. Snap a picture of your receipt and send it in. Because it's about time you had the time of your life. Power up your summer with 5-Hour Energy. No purchase necessary. Sweepstakes ends July 15, 2019. Must be U.S. resident age 18 years or older to enter. For official rules, visit www.5hewin.com. Void where prohibited. Sponsored by Living Essentials, LLC.
The Honda Memorial Day sales event has arrived, and it has great deals on some of our most popular vehicles. Hey, it's the perfect way to kick off summer across America. It's your chance to get an outstanding Honda vehicle with a great offer. So start your summer with the 2019 KBB.com Best Overall Brand during the Honda Memorial Day sales event. Visit your Honda dealer today for a great deal.
Based on 2019 brand image awards from Kelley Blue Book, visit KBB.com for more information.